For Finnis has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. Can the Minister provide an update to the House on how South Australian schools are making progress towards a COVID-safe environment, and is the Minister aware of the progress of approaches in any other jurisdictions?
Minister for Education.
Thank the member for Finnis for the question, and it's one where I know that he has a particularly high level of interest and was very supportive at the beginning of Term 2 and through the school holidays in encouraging his students in his area to get back to school and indeed sharing the advice that Nicola Spurrier and the public health officials provided to students, to staff and the South Australian community on the low-risk environment that schools represented. And Term 2 has indeed been an extraordinarily positive experience in many ways for many South Australian students and families. From about the second or third week of Term 2, we've been back up to 90% attendance in our schools in South Australia. The educational development of our students and young people in South Australia, which we feared greatly might be challenged by the coronavirus pandemic, they have had indeed very limited interruption to that as a result of the pandemic. There was homeschooling arrangements put in place and supporting our students very quickly, but of course we know that face-to-face is best, and very few South Australian students have suffered prolonged absence from school. That hasn't been the case in other jurisdictions around the world. It hasn't even been the case in some other jurisdictions around South Australia, which I note the member asks about, but I'll come back to that. Today we're particularly pleased to provide the public, our schools, our students, our teachers and their school communities with further information about the further release of restrictions that are coming at the end of this month for the last week of Term 2 and which hopefully will be in place throughout Term 3 and Term 4. These are a release of restrictions on things which, while they might not have been the primary educational activities going on in our schools, nevertheless are the sorts of activities that make school the experience that we want it to be. Things like school assemblies that help our schools gel together as a group. Things like sporting carnivals, school discos, the inter-school choirs and camps and band opportunities, the opportunity for class photos. These things that make the school experience as good as we want it to be, these things will now be able to take place once again in our schools in South Australia, where we're leading the way, not just in the nation. Western Australia and Northern Territory are close to us, and the other states on the eastern seaboard are slowly catching up. But we're in fact doing very well by world standards, and our children, our young people are the beneficiaries. We're also really pleased that parents and volunteers are increasingly going to be welcomed back onto our school campuses, which I know many will be glad of. Playgroups will be coming back. It's very important through this, of course, that our families, our children in particular, our staff, if they are unwell, they stay home. Now, this has always been the case in workplaces and schools, but it's very, very important now, and hopefully the use of that good hygiene and the discipline to stay home if you're sick will start being very, very much the norm everywhere. It's very important in this environment. As I said, not every state is the same, and I know that there are some interstate politicians who've been feeling a bit febrile, a little bit feisty in the last couple of days. I've no doubt if they've got children at home that they've been working on, that might have added to their anxiety, because, of course, in New South Wales and Victoria, for months on end, everybody's been working from home, and that's very testy. New South Wales had an unusual return to school. Some students were back on certain days for a period. There were some students told they would be able to come back 1 day a week or 2 days a week, maybe when the moon was high or the moon was low. I'm sure that sort of activity has probably had an impact on the New South Wales Treasurer, for one, in terms of his anxiety. In Victoria, of course, we actually have the Grattan Institute expressing some concerns about the length of time that so many of their students were out of school. And indeed, they are now looking to return to school. South Australia's here. We're leading the nation in our schooling activity, and our children, our young people and our school communities are so glad about the Term 2 that they've had. It's been hard work, but my goodness, our children have been the beneficiaries.